Welcome to the Gov Geeks. I'm Javier, and in this video, we'll interview Dr. Shannon Portillo, Associate Professor and Undergraduate Program Coordinator at the University of Kansas School of Public Affairs and Administration. An award-winning public servant, her work has appeared across the landscape of prestigious journals and news outlets. You're sure to get a ton of great insights. But before we get started, please be sure to click the subscribe button, like us on Facebook, and follow us at thegovgeeks.com for resources on professional development in the public sector. We're here to help you get in and get ahead in government. So without further delay, let's get to the interview. Welcome to the Gov Geeks. I'm very excited to welcome today a very awesome person. I've known her for years. She is a role model for many. Her name is Dr. Shannon Portillo. So welcome to the Gov Geeks.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Javier. I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So you have got a number of accomplishments under your belt already. Could you tell us just a little bit about how you got to where you are and really how awesome you are?
Well, I don't know about that last part, but I can definitely tell you a bit about my journey. So I'm currently a tenured associate professor in the School of Public Affairs and Administration at the University of Kansas. I have my absolute dream job. I got to the study of public administration and the study of government from kind of a roundabout way. When I first started graduate school, I started in a Ph.D. program in American Studies, and I was really interested in looking at Latino civic engagement and how it varied by immigrant generation. So I'm a third generation Mexican American, and the way that my grandparents talk about government is very different than how my parents talk about government, and it was different than how I thought about government. And so I wanted to look at how immigrant generation shapes our understanding of government. And I was in a PhD program, I was going along, and I got an email one day from a man named John Nalbandian, and I had no idea who he was, but the email had an article attached, and he said, "Read this, if you like it, we should talk." I quickly Googled him, and it turned out that he was the chair of one of the best-ranked public administration departments in the nation, which was at the University of Kansas, where I was going to school. And we had a great conversation, and he said, "If you're really interested in studying government, you should come study public administration." And I had no idea what public administration was kind of as a discipline, but the more I heard him talk about it, the more I heard his enthusiasm for public service, I knew that's where I needed to be. So I switched and I got a PhD in public administration. I came out to DC. I got to meet you and your wonderful family and teach at George Mason for 5 years. And now I'm back home and I'm on faculty back where it all started. Really happy to be studying government.
That's fantastic. So you have the opportunity now to do for others what someone once did for you. Exactly.
I feel like I get to pay back some of the best discussions I've had in my life every single day by teaching future public servants.
That's the cool part. I'm willing to bet that the people that you've had the opportunity to teach have gone on to really lead great careers within government and have also mentored and shaped other people's lives as well.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
So I'm excited about today's discussion. We've got a couple of really cool things. I know for sure we're going to talk about top 3 tips that you would have for individuals transitioning as public servants themselves, and then also hearing about a couple of your projects. So let's start at the top. The 3 big things that you would have for people who are interested in moving forward in public service.
Yeah, that's great. You actually kind of led right into one when you brought up mentoring. So I think the most important tip that I would have is to find mentors. And I say mentors plural for a reason. I think that we tend to think about mentorship in kind of a big guru model, that we find that one person to lead us through. And mentorship to me is so much more than that. You can have mentors who are your peer mentors, people you're working alongside who teach you about how to thrive in the day-to-day. You can have those role model mentors who you look up to and the people who you want to be exactly like. And you can have those people who you're mentoring who also help enrich what you're doing in your career path. So kind of mentoring from below. And I think that thinking about your mentors as a really broad, diverse group of people and what you can learn from those all around you is a really important way to continue to improve in public service. So mentoring to me is the most important way that we think about public service and how we can learn from those leaders around us.
That's beautiful because it's an individual leading from where they are rather than the position that they're in.
Exactly.
That's good stuff. Very good tip.
Thank you. I would say the second tip is actually to think about how you develop skills for problems that we don't even know about yet. So I think about some of the really big problems facing particularly local government. I spend a lot of time studying city government, and some of the things that we think about with city government are issues and challenges that we never would have imagined 30 or 40 years ago. Things like getting broadband to rural communities, or thinking about how do we deal with climate change across jurisdictional boundaries, and what do local governments have to do in dealing with that? How do we think about immigration, which is very much a federal policy issue, but affects local government institutions? And so some of those things are opportunities and challenges that we can see coming, and sometimes we don't know what we don't know yet. So developing skills for problems you don't even know exist. And I think some of the best ways to do that are thinking about critical thinking skills, thinking about research skills, thinking about communication skills, and kind of always staying curious.
That's wonderful because it sounds like you enable people in a way to deal with challenges as really opportunities rather than just training them how to do something in the current time, because in the future it could be something completely different.
Exactly. When we talk about education for public servants, we tend to think about functional education. So what are the technical skills that we need? And there are certainly technical skills that we need if it comes from GIS mapping or budgeting skills or clear management and leadership skills, but also kind of those creative adaptive leadership skills. And how do we think about just skill building beyond the immediate problems?
Skill building. I think that's helpful before, in connection to tip number one for mentorship as well, because if you're like the proverb about teaching a person how to fish, if they learn how to do it, then they're better enabled to really help others. So you have more of a ripple effect in trying to promote public service and to promote good government.
Exactly. And I think part of that, trying to promote and trying to be a part of good government, is about staying engaged. And often that means staying engaged in our communities beyond just our job or our profession. So I love being a professor at the University of Kansas that gives back to my state because we're a big public institution. It gives back to my students, but it's also important to me to stay engaged beyond the university, and so to be a part of the community that I live in. So I volunteer with different organizations. I'm on the board of our domestic violence shelter, and so thinking about being engaged as an extension of who you are as a public servant, even if it's not an extension of your employment as a public servant.
Service never stops at the 9 to 5 clock. It's an ongoing thing.
Exactly.
So is engagement tip number 3?
That is, yes.
Excellent. Yeah. Just to be better safe than sorry, I want to make sure we captured all of it. What I love so much about each is that they all actually integrate together. It's not like you do one thing and you're going to be successful, or you do another thing. It's really a larger approach that you take to each of them to really help others and not just help yourself.
Well, and I think we learn a lot by helping others. And that's why public service can be really rewarding, because we do end up getting something out of it. And it's that continual growth that's really important.
It makes me think of that Martin Luther King Jr. quotation about everyone can be a hero because everyone can serve. As long as you're engaged and you're helping others and you're thinking critically about the issues and the people around you, the better off everyone can be.
Exactly.
So those are 3 excellent tips. But I know that the interview isn't just going to end there, because everyone who's tuning into this is super excited to learn more about you. So tell us just a little bit about some of the current research that you've done. I know you just had a publication that came out not too long ago about frontline supervisors. Yeah,
so I'm really excited about a new project that I'm launching with members of my research group, the Socio-Legal Justice Project. So the Socio-Legal Justice Project is a way that undergraduate and graduate students at KU engage in research around issues of social justice and public service. And so stemming off of a project that I worked on with colleagues at George Mason University, looking at frontline supervisors and probation, we're actually going to take some of the things that we learned from that project and design a class around a research project looking at frontline supervisors in policing in the metro area here in Kansas City.
That's great. So it sounds like you had a little bit of connection with mentors and colleagues from George Mason, because I know you spent a little bit of time there, about 5 years or so. So it seems like you are living your own advice and actually everyone else is benefiting from it.
Well, that's the goal. It is trying to kind of take what I learned from the mentors where I had them and kind of pay it forward by continuing to do research and mentor others around that kind of research.
Sure. Yeah, I'm starting to see a bit of a trend. But there's still more stuff, because I know some of the additional research that you're doing is talking about micropowers and a potential connection with gender as well.
Yeah, so as part of this project, what we're looking at is how frontline supervisors assert their powers. So in public administration research, we've tended to have a lot of focus on street-level bureaucrats. Street-level bureaucrats are the people in government who come into contact with citizens. And from the scholarly side, we tend to call them the ultimate policymakers. And they're the ultimate policymakers both temporally. They're the last ones that kind of work through a policy before it reaches the street. And they're the ultimate policymakers because they have a lot of discretion in how they implement policy once it hits the street. We also have a lot of research about senior managers and senior leaders in organizations, people who kind of set the tone for the culture of an organization and people who are developing policy within organizations. But we don't spend a lot of time looking at the middle, and in particular, that move from street level to supervisor. So what we're doing with this project is looking at frontline supervisors, those people who are immediately removed from the street level, but they're the bosses of everyone who are those ultimate policymakers at the street level. And what we're kind of finding is that there are a lot of management choices and leadership choices that are often shaped by gender. Some of this has to do with how street level workers view their bosses, and some of this has to do with how senior managers view frontline supervisors. But what we find is that frontline managers will often kind of create these micro power moves that will really shape the way that policy is understood and policy is implemented throughout an organization. And we're often not conscious of that. We don't really think of those frontline supervisors as policymakers or as people with a lot of power and discretion. But those micro power moves can lead to a lot of power when it comes to how we implement policy and how we understand it within organizations.
That makes perfect sense. I feel sometimes in the reflections that I have on being in government and being a supervisor in government, it's almost like middle management is the cartilage where they feel the pressure kind of from both sides. So your research is saying that based upon gender identities that we make different decisions based on where we are and who we are?
Exactly. And even kind of that understanding of your role as the cartilage is a fascinating way to put it, because a lot of the people you're supervising may see you as kind of this incredibly powerful boss figure who's actually setting all of the policy. But then you also recognize that you have managers above you who are kind of guiding you in that process. And what you're doing is really navigating that space. And how you navigate that space may be shaped by your gender.
That's fascinating. And I think that a lot of people, as they progress through their careers and as they want to get ahead in their government positions, if they would recognize what those differences are and really identify with their own role and their responsibilities, they may be able to be that link that really helps government function really well.
Exactly. And I think some of this is making sure that frontline supervisors recognize some of the challenges that they'll have once they get into those positions. Moving from the front lines of an organization and moving up, oftentimes we think about some of those skills that we need to develop, like how do we understand policy? How do we think about management techniques? And we may not think about how our own identities, gender, race, ethnicity, age, also shape some of those understandings. And how do we understand what we need to know to be successful in those positions?
Oh, of course, because it's the whole person. It's not like you kind of take your identity and you set it aside, or your experiences, etc., that you have. You bring those into your current opportunity. So how to think about best using them.
Yeah, one of the things that I really am excited about for this project is that I'm designing a class to have students actually go out and collect data with me. And the students will analyze that data with me as well. And we'll be kind of moving from data collection through analysis to knowledge creation and thinking about what does this mean for policy and practice. So these are undergraduate students. Some of them may go on to graduate school. Many of them will not, and they'll go into the world of practice. But I want them to have an understanding of how do we actually do the research side of things and what does it mean to create knowledge. So they'll get to see the research question, kind of how does gender do this framing? They'll get to see how we try to answer that question by going out and talking to public servants in that frontline supervisor role. And then they'll see how social scientists analyze data and what that means for their career. And I think that it will really help them understand. We tend to hear a lot about evidence-based practices and evidence-based policy in government these days. This is the evidence. And so they'll have a better understanding of what do we mean when we talk about evidence in the workplace.
So it's neat that you are quite literally on the very front lines of developing how public servants really think and interact and forge new policy. You're just setting the tone for how government will be in the future. How does that feel?
Well, it's exciting. It's certainly not something I'm doing on my own. I want students to feel really empowered when they're in the workplace, that they know how to engage with the research. And I think that they often feel more empowered when they've been able to touch it and feel it and be a part of it. So that part, I feel like then they'll go into their workplaces with a respect for research and an understanding of how knowledge works and how that really plays an important role in what they're doing for the rest of their lives.
Wow. I just had to take a moment and let that sit for a little bit. That just sounds so cool. So I have one more great question for you.
Okay.
So given all of the experiences you've had, the opportunity that you've had to work with so many people, not just in your own personal career, but you furthering the careers of others around you and quite literally shaping the promise of what government can be for the public, what would you say is the most great recommendation that you can give a person when they go about public service?
Ooh, the greatest recommendation going about public service. That's a big question.
It's all got to be like a one tiny little thing.
Yeah, I don't know that there is kind of a best recommendation for everyone, but I think that the best advice that I've ever had is to remain curious. And I think that remaining curious means that we continue to ask questions, we continue to engage in our own development professionally, skill-wise, research-wise, and we continue to reach out to those around us for help. And that's really important.
Well, what would you give others as a suggestion to find out more information, either about your research or what you're doing with others? Is there a website, or is there anything that people should follow or anything like that?
Well, I would be happy to have people follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is prof, _SP. And I just joined the board of a new organization, Academic Women in Public Administration, and I would encourage those interested in the study of government and the study of public administration to get more involved with that organization, because that's really highlighting a lot of women in the field and research done by women about how we can improve public service.
I like that. That's fantastic. And all of the links, all the information will be put down below in the description as well. So Shannon, I just really want to thank you so much for your time, for sharing the wisdom that you have about all of this, the hard-earned wisdom, really. It's no wonder why so many people gravitate towards you and your courses and really want to get more involved to make the world a better place, because you help them to accomplish that goal. That's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much, Javier. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me this evening. I love everything you're doing with Gov Geeks.
We hope you found this video helpful. Please give it a thumbs up and please leave a comment. We want to know how to make our work of value to you. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Together, we can help government meet its mission and serve the people. We're in it to make a difference. Thank you so much for watching. Service for public servants.